We've been asked to talk a little bit about our background in behavior analysis, how we got into the discipline, and some of the events that might have occurred during the time we've been in the field. And the way this will work is I'll ask Linda some of the questions, and then I'll provide my own responses afterward. So, what led you to become a behavior analyst?
Well, my interest when I was both an undergraduate student and a graduate student at Louisiana State University was really primarily in developmental disabilities. And although some of my favorite classes as an undergraduate were learning behavioral courses, I was really excited about working with people with developmental disabilities. And so my interest in behavior analysis really came about because that was the most effective tool that I could use to be able to accomplish the goals with a population that I thought really needed committed people to work with them. And then over time, I became more and more interested in the conceptual part of behavior analysis and application of that outside of the realm of developmental disabilities. How about you?
That's interesting. I had kind of the reverse experience through various undergraduate courses in which behavior analysis was only lightly mentioned. It resonated with me. The scientific kind of logical basis of it seemed to make sense. And so I had a research methods course with Avery Everson at North Florida, and asked him about behavior analysis, and he gave me a copy of Science and Human Behavior, and he said, read this, and if after you read this you want to do behavior analysis, then we'll talk. And then I sort of got in it from there. And then when I was in early part of graduate school, I saw a talk by Brian Iwata, a full-day workshop on applying behavior analysis to improve the lives of people with developmental disabilities. And then I got hooked into what we could accomplish with that population. So, well, how were you trained as a behavior analyst?
Well, I was fortunate enough while I was in graduate school to have a major professor who was behavioral, and my clinical psychology program was generally a pretty behavioral clinical PhD program, and that is relatively rare. And later, I was fortunate enough to work in a different clinical PhD program that was very behavioral at Western Michigan University. But while getting my degree in clinical psychology, I got my minor in school psychology. And at LSU, we were very fortunate to have several behavior analysts there who taught courses in behavior analysis and single subject research design and applying behavior analysis within school settings. So that was my academic training. And when I was looking for an internship in clinical psychology, I looked around the country at different sites. Again, primarily I was looking for a site that would allow me to have experiences with people with developmental disabilities, and particularly young children. And some of those sites were much more behavior analytic than others. And as I looked around the country, those were the ones that generally really appealed to me. So I elected to go to the Kennedy Krieger Institute for my internship and remained there for a postdoctoral fellowship, and just had a wonderful opportunity to train with a lot of great behavior analysts that really contributed to my training and gave me the opportunity to explore a lot of different ideas, both on a clinical basis and also to develop research skills in behavior analysis. So those were probably the most critical pieces of my training in behavior analysis.
After I left my undergraduate institution at North Florida, I started working with Jack Gewirtz at Florida International University. And Jack does work in behavior analysis of infant and human development. And we worked together for a year, and it was a fascinating year because Jack was a pretty senior faculty member. He was actually Don Baer's major professor. And so Jack really instilled in me the appreciation of the history of behavior analysis and a lot of the earlier work that I don't think I would have made contact with otherwise. And really showed me the appreciation of conceptual analysis and sort of core behavior analytic work outside of application. And then after I decided that I wanted to work in developmental disabilities, I transferred to Florida State and spent 3 years with John Bailey and his research group. And we only had one behavior analyst in the department, and that was John, but he had 12 doctoral students in his lab, and so we had our own little behavioral culture. And what was interesting about it was that half of the students worked in developmental disabilities and the other half worked in performance management and OBM. So we each got a pretty good degree of cross-training. But because I didn't spend a lot of time in graduate school, I needed quite a bit of finishing after my PhD. So when I worked at University of Nevada, Reno, Steve and Linda Hayes really shaped my professional repertoire quite a bit. And I got to work with Sid Bijou for a time, which was an outstanding experience. And then really I think the sort of final pieces of my education were in the editorial process. I submitted a lot of my early work to JABA, most of which was not eventually published in JABA, but I got Wayne Fisher and Kathleen Piazza, whom I know you worked with at Kennedy Krieger. They were almost exclusively my action editors, and through their really careful editorial work, really, I think, helped put some of the finishing touches on my research repertoire. Well, during your early days in the field, what was it like to be a behavior analyst?
You know, it was a really interesting time. I started my undergraduate degree, and don't anybody count back the years, in 1987. And which, if you've seen some of the talks on early intensive behavioral intervention, you know that there was a study published that year that was very interesting. Lovaas study had just come out, and my major professor, Johnny Matson, who also did work in developmental disabilities and autism, you know, it was my first year of graduate school. I, you know, barely knew how to find the bathroom, much less what I was going to do really with my career. And, you know, he said, go read this article. And if you want to do something that's exciting, that's going to make a big impact on people's lives, that we're going to be researching for years and years, go look at this stuff and decide what you want to do. This is really exciting, and this is where the field's going to be going with respect to really good behavioral treatment. This is exciting stuff. This is going to change the playing field. So I was so excited about it, I could hardly stand myself, you know, wow, what we could do. But it hadn't really kind of gotten out there yet. You know, this was just brand new. So I think academics knew about it. People who knew Lovaas knew about it, but the world did not know about it yet. But over the next 4 to 5 years, the scene really started to shift, and people began to be so excited about this work. And so by the time I graduated with my PhD and had finished my internship in the mid-90s, there were so many opportunities. People were like, you know, oh, we know about this stuff and we're ready to hire people who do this stuff. You mean you do this stuff? This is exactly what your training has been. So in some ways, I really kind of was finishing my degree right at the time when there began to be a big market for people like me, not just practicing clinicians, but people who might take a job in academia to train practicing clinicians, do research, develop a clinic where there had not been one before. And so it was a very exciting time to be a behavior analyst. And now that same furor in that same area to some extent has come to dominate behavior analysis, certainly within the last decade. And we can talk more about that when we talk about other questions. But what about for you?
I actually wasn't exposed to that early work until a little bit later, but one of the things I remember about graduate school was that was right around the time when I think the notion of conducting functional assessment and using function-based treatment really started to be disseminated to the ground level, you know, just beyond, you know, the work published in JABA. And I remember learning about it and doing practicum activities in various agencies, seeing both the former way of doing things and the newer way of doing things. And I really felt that we were there at something new, and it was nice to not just be trained in the new system, but to have some experience seeing and participating in both. And I think that was very exciting. That was also the period where all the stimulus preference assessment research started to happen, and it was exciting to see that literature develop very rapidly, along with the non-contingent reinforcement literature, and to be able to take these brand new products, you know, hot off the JABA shelf and start using them with clients. And very exciting time.
Yeah. In my second year of graduate school, LSU hired a brand new professor right out of graduate school, and that was Tim Vollmer. So he had just come out of Awada's lab. He only had one graduate student to work with him, and my major professor said, you should go work with this guy. He's going to be doing exciting stuff, to kind of do that in addition to what you do with me. And it was a huge opportunity, and it always seemed like we were doing a study on something that was about to come out in JAVA. So, like there's this stuff happening in preference assessment, but it hadn't been published yet, but we should do this next study. And I think I was very fortunate to be in that situation, because a lot of my early studies that I got to be a part of, they really were the beginnings of some of the work in particularly automatic reinforcement and, identifying behavior maintained independent of social consequences, and preference assessments, and how you can kind of integrate those strategies to develop good behavioral treatments. And it was exciting. We were a very small group at first, but it was exciting.
I wonder what students today will report as the exciting factors right now. So what do you consider to be your most important contributions now, or what do you think you might want to be remembered for down the road?
Gosh, I really hope I'm remembered for something that hasn't happened yet. That'll be bigger than anything that I've done to this point. But, one of the things that I've been pretty committed to in the last 10 years is just trying to get people interested in the use of behavior analysis outside of autism, because we've really sparked that interest, and it's a wildfire raging. There's so many jobs, there's so much to be done, there's so much that we're learning, all of which is wonderful. But in some ways, it's almost as if, if you think about behavior analysis as a tree that could be branching out in every direction, the middle of the tree is just shooting for the sky, and some of the other tendrils that could be growing in other directions, like aging and safety. The growth is slower, and unless you happen to make contact with a behavior analyst who's maybe one of the few people doing work in that area, you're unlikely to get excited about it. So hopefully one of my contributions will be through the behavioral gerontology special interest group and through some public presentations, just making people aware of, the fact that aging is an area that could be interesting. And then in autism, that which is the other area where I do a lot of work, I have no idea what it'll be, but I hope that one of the areas that it might be in is basically advocating us being kind of I guess maybe conservative a little bit in the degree to which we get very excited about new strategies before we've kind of really figured out how to make those strategies useful. For example, right now I'm editing a special issue on video modeling and autism, and everybody loves video modeling. Boy, you could teach anything with video modeling. It's so exciting. There's so much work being done in the area. And, one of the questions we still really need to be asking is, well, but why would you necessarily use video modeling rather than live modeling? If it gives you efficiencies, if it gives you better effectiveness, if it makes it easy to demonstrate something that would otherwise be cumbersome to demonstrate it, wonderful. But we don't necessarily have a whole lot of data suggesting that's the effect. Or that that's really always the case with video modeling. So maybe something along those lines. How about you?
I think my most important contributions have been the students that I've trained. I'm passionate about teaching and research, and if I didn't have an opportunity to train graduate students, I would still be involved in research at some point. But to me, research is most important as a vehicle to train new scientist practitioners, and I've been really fortunate over the years to work with about 24 outstanding doctoral and master's students, and about half of them are clinical directors, and they're doing really excellent work in their own agencies, and the other half are faculty members. They have their own students, and I think that hopefully my research record will stand up and stand the test of time. But I think through the students and their students and their contributions to their clients, I think that's where I've been able to have the most impact and probably will continue to.
I think that that's an important point to bring up, the notion of the impact that you can have through your students. I was not excited about going into academia when I was in graduate school. I really wanted to be a practicing clinician, and my major professor just, exerted some influence, in a positive way. But I think every 6 months he'd kind of call me into his office and kind of say, now I want you to just keep thinking about this. Like, I'm not going to let you say no yet. You just got to keep thinking about this, because, my notion was that, but I could have more impact on people's lives if I were working with them. And he frequently tried to convince me, no, you're going to have more impact if you train people who go out and do what you could have done as one person, only train 10 of them. I think one thing that I might do a little differently, if I were redoing, let's say, the last decade that I've spent in academia training PhDs, is I probably would have taken a greater proportion of them in the area of aging rather than autism. I probably took a 50-50 split. And the ones that I worked with in the area of aging have almost exclusively now become faculty members in other programs who can train some people to do behavioral gerontology. The ones I trained in autism, the majority of them are practitioners, which is good because it means that I kind of, replicated myself, so to speak. But if we don't have enough people teaching other people about behavioral gerontology, we're going to kind of lose that as a branch of the tree. So I probably would have trained more of those people.
And I think the one thing I probably would have done differently, kind of knowing what I know now, is from a graduate training perspective, doing a better job of customizing a student's experiences in graduate school for a specific career. I think too often students who, let's say, for example, get a master's degree in behavior analysis, the student who goes on for the PhD and the student who goes to work for a clinical agency get the exact same experiences, the exact same courses, same practicum opportunities and research. And those are very different career paths, and I think they demand somewhat differently configured training experiences. And so I think getting a better read on that early on in my career for the students who are going to be faculty members and those who weren't, and making sure that their opportunities were lined up appropriately enough and in the right way, I think that would have been a better approach. Well, I know your answer to this question. What areas of the field would you like to see more work in?
Well, certainly aging, and I've kind of already banged that drum, but I think issues related to health and wellness, regardless of the population. We have just a dramatically increasing percentage of young people who are obese, who are not as healthy as they could be. The type 2 diabetes we're seeing so much more frequently in late teenagers and young adults, and we know that a lot of this is related to lifestyle activities. It's related to diet, to exercise, to a variety of health and wellness behaviors. And society cares about this. We're wanting to crack this nut, but I guess I just haven't seen anything. I'm not convinced that we yet have really identified great strategies for making this change. And I think that's something that's well suited to behavior analysis, both at that kind of macro level of how do we need to be exerting some influence on society and business so that it is not cheaper to get a double burger with cheese than it is to get fresh fruits and vegetables. And how can we impact that societally? And then also individually, how do we really get people interested in planning for their own future health? We know that it's hard to behave now for the outcomes that you're going to experience later. But we also know some really good strategies for kind of trying to bridge that gap, and I don't really see that happening on big scope. So those would be two of the areas where I'd like to see more work.
Yeah, me too. I also would like to see more work in general education. Now, we've had a lot of success producing products in general education, direct instruction, precision teaching. Headsprout is very exciting. And for numerous political and social reasons, we haven't had the penetration in the school system that we would have liked to have had. But having a child in the public school system now, I'm particularly primed that there's just so much improvement that could be made with really modest behavioral technology that we've had access to for years. I'd like to see a little bit more of that in terms of efforts of behavior analysts to get into general education, and also a bit more work in that area in the sort of the mainstream scholarship community in behavior analysis. Well, what do you see as the future of behavior analysis, or let's say the near future?
I think behavior analysis is alive and well and kicking and growing, and jobs are being created. I think that if we really want to take it to the next level, our young behavior analysts, and even those of us that are already in the field, look, what's going to make the next thing happen to spread our impact, I think, is going to have to do with influencing other disciplines. We're going to have to take the next step in being multidisciplinary and in kind of taking personal responsibility to influence the behavior of speech-language pathologists, occupational therapists, physicians, nurses, a variety of different disciplines that intersect with what we do, but may be completely unaware of the things that we have to offer them. And I think that, what will help guarantee that success is if behavior analysts view it as a really valuable repertoire to hone their skills on how to effectively interact with people who aren't behavior analysts in ways that are, involving effective communication, valuing what that other person that you're interacting with values more than what you value, although obviously one end should achieve the other. But I think that I see the future of behavior analysis, even if it's, early intervention in autism. There's a good chance that in 20 years, EIBI is going to be delivered in public school systems, either well or horribly. And but there may come a point when financially the back breaks, and there aren't going to be private EIBI companies everywhere that are paid for by insurance. I could be wrong about that. Maybe money is just like, that money tree is springing deeper roots. But if it's the case that it's going to be delivered in the public school system, then we've got to get better at making the public school system love us. So that's where I think the future of behavior analysis is going to be. But I think it's a healthy one. I think it's a positive one.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you about the need to work with other disciplines. I think within our discipline, we're facing a pretty interesting challenge, and Steve Hayes would have called this a good problem, and that is, we have professionalized the work that we do now. We have credentials, and currently in 2009 we have 7,500 certificates in behavior analysis, and so we have a profession that never existed before, and we've had a need to develop a code of ethics and to teach professionalism skills, and sometimes some ways for the first time, and there has been an influence of people in our discipline and at our conferences that have different goals. They have professional goals and professional training and development goals. And there clearly has been a rift recently between sort of the basic and the applied spectrum and ABA and APBA. And I think that over the next 10 years or so, we're going to see this play out, and we are going to somehow have to resolve the fact that there are thousands and thousands more people who are interested in delivering the technology of behavior analysis than there are scholars and conceptual analysts within behavior analysis, and we're going to have to figure out some way to develop professional infrastructures to train and educate and manage and maintain, because these are all really important pieces, but we're definitely experiencing growing pains right now. And I think that one of the tangible issues, certainly at ABA over the next decade or so, will be this notion of sort of professional behavior analysis. And I'm curious to see how it plays out. But again, that's a good problem to have. The problem is, how do we deal with these new thousands of people who are interested in what it is that we do? Well, the final question here, and I love this question, is what message would you like to send to students of the future?
I'm going to let you answer that one first, because I, as always, want the last word.
All right. Students of the future. It is 2009.
Here is your time capsule.
Well, my message, I guess, would be just about graduate training, and that is, if you haven't done so already, sit down with your major professor or faculty advisor and articulate exactly what you want to get out of graduate school, what your path, as you see it right now, would like to be, and how your professor can help you arrange the optimal opportunities for you to meet your goals, and then live and breathe behavior analysis every waking hour while you're in graduate school, because the discipline is so large. There's such a huge literature and so many things you need to know, and you're not going to get not even half of it in graduate school. I certainly didn't. But once you leave graduate school, it becomes so difficult to learn new things and expand your repertoires. Just take advantage and maximize that opportunity that you have now while you're in it, and while learning and exposure are really pretty easy to accomplish. Mm-hmm. The last word.
The last word, I would two words. The first would be, if you are watching this video, then it means you're watching something on the history of behavior analysis, and do that and keep doing that and do more of that, because some of the most impactful of my experiences in behavior analysis have been ones that have come about through my contact with some of the early events in behavior analysis, or some of the people who created our early activities in behavior analysis. People like Sid Bijou, Murray Sidman, many of their students, Jack Michael. These were amazing people who had to figure out how we would think about things before we had a well-developed terminology to talk about things, which means they didn't have constraints. They weren't convinced yet that it was a great idea to parse positive reinforcement versus negative reinforcement. They had to figure out what the strengths and weaknesses of that were. So I think that making contact with the early stuff, not just through someone's chapter on it, is really important. The second message that I would send is revel in your opportunity to be in graduate school, and always kind of try to actively step back and see the bigger picture instead of the ongoing stressors, and to stay excited about what we do, because I think that it is a very exciting field, and there's a lot of there are too many opportunities to get frustrated with what doesn't go the way you want, whether it's the way the field is developing or clinical activities. But there are thousands more opportunities to be excited about what we have accomplished and what we will.
Well said. Thank you very much.